Thanks everybody for joining us today. You're here with SalesIntel and Leadspace, and we'll be talking about 5 tips on how to work 10% harder and 100% smarter. Of course, with everything that's going on right now, everybody's trying to figure out how to make the most of it. We'll talk a little bit about it. The answer, though, is not to work that much harder. Because one, there's a limit to how much harder we can work, and two, everybody just working harder but not working smarter means that it's actually harder for us to all get our jobs done. So we'll talk about how to do things smarter. Let's see, let me get this to advance. There we go. I'm Jason Hubbard. I'm Vice President of Growth at SalesIntel. We have Jim Hopkins here with us. Welcome, Jim.
Hello there.
Jim is the Senior Director of Marketing at Leadspace. All right, quick agenda. So we're going to start off with easy as pie, something that Jim came up with over at Leadspace as a way to really direct what you're doing. Then we're going to talk about using data-driven pre-targeting, adjusting outreach channels and strategies, how to leverage the right content, and then finally shifting your pitch and marketing tone. So we'll let you kick this off, Jim, and go over what exactly is pie.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me today. It's going to be a good discussion, I think. So besides Tiger King, something I've been thinking a lot about during the quarantine is pie, and both eating pie and talking about pie. And I've shared this with a couple different groups, but it's a framework that we use at Leadspace internally for our own marketing, but we've seen that it has applications to our customers as well, and we've shared it a little bit with them. So PI is an acronym, as you can probably guess. It stands for Profile, Intent, and Engagement. And this really speaks to the type of data and targeting that can really impact your marketing and really make it more effective. I think as marketers, often we get maybe a little fixated on one of these areas. We get a piece of the pie, and we don't step back and think of the whole pie. And that's really one of the keys to working smarter, I think, is really getting the data you need to be able to know and understand your customers, to understand their perspective, and to be able to help prioritize certain segments, certain markets, certain people, certain companies, so that your marketing programs, your sales teams, everything can just be a little more effective. So let me go through each of these pieces and help you understand kind of what each of them mean. From profile, we think about that as who the entity is. And in B2B, we're talking about companies a lot. If you're doing ABM, you're taking a company first or an account first perspective. But then we're also thinking about person data. We're thinking about the technologies that they use, maybe even the targeting criteria that we've built, like an ideal customer profile, which I'll talk about a little bit in a second. Persona profiles that we create, fit scoring, things like that. So those are all profile, the sort of immutable characteristics of a company or a person. And really the way that we think about this, if you look at the purple slice there, that's the saleswoman, and that's her perspective out to the world. So it's, as a vendor, who do we want to be talking to? Who are the people, who are the companies that we want to be targeting? And that's, an important perspective to have. But sometimes we stop there, right? We don't go any further. We think that's enough, which, it can be an effective way to target for sure. But then looking at the other side of the equation is the buyer and what they're interested in, who they want to talk to, who they're interested in sparking up a relationship with. And that's where intent data becomes really important. And if you're not familiar with intent data, you could do a whole other webinar on that. But that's basically the digital signals that are showing what a company or a person is interested in from a topical perspective, or maybe even a technology perspective. And then engagement, I think we're all very familiar with too. This is the data that you collect in web analytics and marketing automation and CRM. It's the interactions that you're having with the customer. And that's why there at the bottom, you see it's the intersection between the buyer and the seller, because that's when we actually do interact with them. So all three pieces of this data really form the complete picture. If you're not looking at the buyer's perspective, you're not understanding what they're researching outside of just the engagements they're having with you. So maybe you're getting into the cycle a little later, or you're not getting a complete picture of what they're really interested in. If you don't have the engagement data, you're not familiar with what they've actually told you that they want to hear from you, or that they're interested in from you. And then if you don't have the profile data, you don't understand if they're the right fit for your products or solutions in the first place. So really the combination of all those pieces of data and that picture as a whole is what will help you work smarter to start off with.
That's
Anything
great.
to add there, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, this is one that I cover often. You know, like you said, if you know, a lot of people really focus on like one or maybe two of these, but you're not getting the whole thing if you do that. And so, yeah, you know, I tell people all the time, no matter how good of a job you do defining your ICP, who your ideal customer is, you know, you're going to have hundreds or thousands of people that match that criteria. Of those, only about 15% are actually going to be in the market at that time. So, you know, your chances of just randomly hitting on the right ones are fairly slim. You know, even on the intent side, a lot of people are going to show intent that may not actually be in your ICP. So you've got to try and get those to overlap. And then, you know, it's similar story on the engagement side. If you've got a decent, you know, inbound or lead generation engine or content engine, then you're doing, you know, hundreds or thousands of inbound engaged people on a weekly basis. You know, I know for us, you know, we're typically somewhere between like, you know, a few hundred and 1,000 a week. That's a lot of people to follow up with. And so, you know, if you're not doing something to try and figure out the intersection of all three of these, then, you know, you're very much in a hit or miss strategy. And you know, it's very hard to work smart whenever you're doing that type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about as effective as going down the phone book in alphabetical order, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And plus, pie is delicious. It comes in all flavors. So yeah, I think you hit on some of this that we want to discuss next, which is sort of the taking the data that you have, taking that full pie, and then using it to really hone in on the targets that you want to go after. And that, you know, applies to whether you're going out for, you know, an ad campaign, a sales blitz or sales play, a marketing automation campaign. Really getting your targeting right first will make things much more effective. You'll have to, you know, only work 10% harder, but, you know, you'll have gotten smarter first. So the diagram here sort of symbolizes the levels of targeting that we normally think of, and that at Leadspace, I know SalesIntel does this too. We work with our customers to help address. So first, there's the TAM. If you're familiar with that, the total addressable market. This is essentially all the companies, if you're a B2B organization, all the companies that you could potentially target. And this is usually pretty simple criteria. Maybe it's employee size, revenue, and industry, or maybe there's geography in there somewhere, but it's a few of those filters. And, you know, you have sort of the resulting list of accounts that's probably somewhere in the thousands, maybe, you know, if you're a bigger company, in the millions. And honestly, like we talked about, you know, it's a lot of people to cover. It's a lot of ground to cover. Nobody can really address their TAM in one fell swoop. It would be very expensive, and, you know, you wouldn't be working smarter at that point. So the real question here, we talked about not adding to the noise, or not just mass blasting. I shared with Jason, I spent some time at a previous company, an ABM company, and we called it mass backwards. So if you're targeting your TAM in full, you really are not working smarter. You're working harder, essentially, or paying more. But you know, really in this time, and especially when digital has become a little bit noisy, getting a handle on your TAM is really the first step. So do you understand your total addressable market? That's the first cut that you want to make. The next cut is ideal customer profile, or ICP. And this goes even further to get to, you know, the characteristics the attributes, the firmographics, whatever data that you have from that pie that makes up your ideal customer profile. And you can do this a few different ways. I've broken it down here to think about simple criteria versus AI powered. And really the advantage of using AI to uncover your ideal customer profile is that you can just look at more data, right? You can look at that full pie. You can really let the machines do the work of finding the trends and the patterns in your existing customer base, your existing customer data, even opportunity data from your CRM, to uncover the patterns of the types of companies that are most likely to buy from you out of that whole total addressable market. So that really narrows you in. But like Jason said, only a certain percentage of that ICP, no matter if they're a great fit or not, are going to be in market to buy something right away. We're only in market to buy, a large technology platform, for instance, every few years if we're moving fast, but it could be even more than that. So not all of these companies are always in market. So then it gets to, are we going one step further and looking at intent? Do we have intent data to tell us or to signal to us that these people are in market? Do we have engagement data that's also helping to signal that? And one kind of layer on top of all of this is buyer persona profiles. So we can take a cut of all this by account, and that is a great start, especially for a B2B organization doing ABM. But then how do we get to the people within those accounts that are the right people to be talking to? And that's just another level of pre-targeting that you can do to be smarter and to be really more effective. Again, then, putting this into action is the key. So having a TAM, step one, having an ideal customer profile, step two, looking at in-market buyers, step three, but then how do we activate that data or the list or the targeting criteria into channels, whether that's ad platforms or LinkedIn or in CRM or in marketing automation, and really having a strategy for doing that rather than having to rebuild that targeting criteria in each platform separately is going to be the key to being smarter, to working smarter. Building a segment once, whether that's in a technology like a CDP, like Leadspace offers, or some other way, sort of manually if you'd like, or in your own technology, but then being able to activate that targeting criteria across channels, even multiple channels at once, is really the smartest level, the highest level of targeting criteria. Jason, how have you experienced that targeting aspect in your work?
Yeah, I mean, something that I'd be interested in hearing your take on, you mentioned, automation / AI. One of the things that I've seen in that space, and I've been, an early adopter, for instance, I was one of the beta users before Everstream was even in market, is, people a lot of times get frustrated with that type of tech because they'll try and use it as an end-all solution. Hey, my technology platform, my AI spit out this result and I'm supposed to just run with it. And again, I think, what you talked about on the first slide is really crucial. Like it takes pulling all these different elements together and looking at your signals across those and bringing in that human element as well. I mean, we deal with this all the time on the data side. We of course have to use machine processing and AI and all of that stuff just to churn through the sheer amount of data. But that data, those automated processes typically only get you to about 70% accuracy on the data side. And so that's why we have to then run that through, human researchers to go and hand verify records. That's really the only way you can get it to that 95+% that we promise. And, I don't think that's specific to data. I think that's kind of all of the above. You've got to, there's not a silver bullet. There's not a really easy one-off solution to all of this. You've got to kind of bring it all together and use the signals intelligently where you can get them.
Yeah, and I think AI is still, a little early. We're still figuring out the best ways to apply AI. We were talking with an analyst from Gartner yesterday, actually, and he had some great thoughts on it, and talked about how AI is really to help improve things, to help make things better, not maybe an end unto itself, but it's a way to make things simpler, make things better, to work for us. And there's lots of different types of AI, like you talked about, being able to sort through large amounts of data, being able to detect patterns, being able to detect language, and lots of different ways to apply artificial intelligence. But in B2B marketing, there's a lot of ways to help surface the signals or the data that is most relevant to your particular business. And that's, it's competitive advantage, basically competitive differentiator, to be able to use your own data to power some sort of actionable flag or signal to you to be able to do something better than, a competitor, better or unique from anybody else.
Yep. Well, cool. So yeah, we'll continue kind of down the funnel. So you've defined your ICP, you've looked at intent signals, you looked at engagement. You know the companies, you know the personas, the people. You even ideally have it down to the timing of how to reach out. So what channels do you use to reach out? And what strategies do you have across that? So typically in B2B, your primary channel is going to be things like email, phone calls, video, social, events. To a larger degree, increasingly, people are starting to tiptoe into text messages or SMS. It's a little bit of a fuzzy area. We've had some success in doing that. And it's definitely moving pretty dramatically, here over the last year or two. Whereas that used to be a great big no-no, and now you're increasingly seeing people that actually prefer that as a channel. And so you want to tailor your outreach strategies to match where people are, and not only where they are, but what type of outreach you're doing. For instance, like text messages to confirm an appointment or a meeting. Very few people are going to object to that. A cold text message to try and pitch a product, you're going to see a lot more pushback on. And so that kind of moves to the second one. Is the outreach being done well? Is the messaging done? Is the timing right? Is the channel correct for what you're trying to do? Taking the time to plan out what you're doing, but balancing, planning that out or scripting versus doing it off the cuff, but also balancing, making sure that you're doing it in an authentic, customized way, and you're not just blasting out at volume generic stuff. And then data on an individual level. So do you have connections with these people? Is there somebody else in your organization that knows that person, or somebody at that company you can get a referral to? And then talking about preferred channels. I mean, one anecdote that I've discovered over the years is salespeople love to just pick up the phone and call you. As a marketer, that tends to drive me crazy because I'm usually in the middle of something, and even my own salespeople will just call me off the cuff to talk about something. Flip side, marketers tend to be a little bit deeper dive and think through things, and so in my experience, then marketers prefer email conversations. And none of that is a hard and fast rule. Individuals within each of those categories are going to have their own preferences. The one thing that I've found effective for my salespeople, I've trained them on, is whenever they very first engage in a conversation, they get somebody actually replying and you're starting the back and forth, ask them what their preferred channel is. Do you prefer if I call you? Do you prefer if I email you? Do you prefer LinkedIn or text messages? And make note of that. And anytime you're trying to initiate something, start off on that preferred channel. Anything you guys have seen over there, Jim?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Recording it is fantastic, whether that's like a custom field in CRM or some other way. I think that's preferred channel is excellent, because I think it changes based on preference, right?
Yep.
And knowing your customer's key. Yeah, I think also having the ability to measure or track performance across these channels is really key. Being able to see it at a macro level with some sort of reporting tool or BI or whatever allows you to really make adjustments on the fly, making that visible both to like frontline salespeople, marketers, all the way up to, you know, the CEO and whatever, to really have visibility across the organization. I think it's really key too.
Yep. And so, yeah, I love this stat. I mean, I'll oftentimes ask the leading or trick question, what channel is most effective? It's a trick question. There is no answer to that. The key is, and the answer is, all of the channels that are effective is what you need to be focusing on. And across the board, you need a multi-channel approach. Even if most of your people reply via email, or most people reply via LinkedIn, or you get most people on the phone, that doesn't mean neglect those other channels, because those other channels are additional touches. And, you know, of course, everybody's familiar with all of the studies of, you know, it takes X number of touches. I believe the most recent was, you know, 8+ touches to try and get somebody to engage or reply. Each one of those channels counts as a touch, and the more that you do it across different channels, the more likely you are to break through and make a connection. But, you know, key to that is make sure that they know you're doing it. So, like, if you're calling and not leaving a voicemail, that's not going to count as a touch, because they're not going to associate that phone number with you. And, you know, another good tip is whenever you're reaching out across a different channel, cross-reference back to the other channel and other outreach that you've done, so that you're bridging that gap and you know, in the outreach. But yeah, if you add 2 additional channels on average, you're going to see a 400%, 4 times improvement in engagement and connections. Getting a little short on time, so we'll get through these as quickly as we can. Yeah, so, you know, you've identified who to reach out to, what companies to target, what channels to try and reach out via. You know, you've optimized some of your you know, balancing between, you know, having stuff scripted versus off the cuff, but not relying on automation. So, you know, then what do you share? What do you use to try and, you know, get conversations going, get people interested? And so, you know, this is where value add content comes in. And, you know, Jim, I assume you guys have probably seen the same thing that I have, but in particular, over the last, you know, couple of months, you know, value add content has become even more important than ever. You know, straight up, you know, sales pitches, you know, are falling increasingly flat or on deaf ears. Versus value add content, consumption of and engagement with that, for pretty much everybody I've spoken to, is way up. But the key to that is make sure you're getting the right content to the right people. So, you know your personas, know the industries, verticals, pain points of the companies and the people at those companies, because you know, even if you're talking to multiple people at the same company, if they have different roles, then they're going to have different pain points, different things they're primarily interested in. So, you know, make sure you're tailoring that content so that it's going to speak to them. And again, you know, don't just you know, rely on spray and pray of, you know, really generic, you know, across the board content, or just straight up sales pitches, which gets us to the last one. You know, try and follow the 85-15 rule, especially whenever you're dealing with top of the funnel stuff. Have 85% of your content be value add, trying to educate them, trying to actually provide value to them, and try and limit 15% of your content to pitching the solution and how it's going to solve their pain. Is that roughly consistent with what you guys have been seeing, especially here recently?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been some questions by Kevin in the Q&A and in the chat. I think there's some interesting thoughts there if you have a chance to check it out. But I think persona sort of targeting and content approaches are really interesting. And I think you kind of hit on it, that, you know, there's bigger buyer groups, and so multiple personas play a factor. I've experienced this recently, and I thought about it in this way. during quarantine, I'm around, you know, the family and the kids a little more. So I'm a little more in tune with my wife on some of the issues she's dealing with trying to get our kids to eat food. So I relate to it this way. There's two sort of strategies that we normally employ, right? We want our kids to eat what we prepared, right? And we try to cram it down their throat. And that's, you know, similar to us just creating content and wanting to kind of hard sell it, right? Push it through, you know, make it work, no matter who it is. And then there's days where we're all tired. We've worked a long day. We don't want to deal with feeding them. So we just say, go to the kitchen and find whatever you want. And that's similar to, like, you know, sending them to the homepage, right? Like figure out what content you need yourself. And, you know, I wouldn't recommend the third approach too often, which is basically becoming a short order cook and, you know, cooking different meals for each child. But that's essentially kind of what creating content for buyer personas might be. You're creating a meal that you know that they're most likely to eat, right? That's most likely to nourish them, to nurture them. So, you know, I think it is really important. The more we can do that, I think the better performing will be, the smarter we'll end up being.
Yep. All right, so last one here, we're getting close to the end. So some notes on you know, tailoring your pitch and tone. You know, this is particularly important right now. You know, anybody that's been paying attention, you know, it's pretty clear to see both what people are engaging with, but also, you know, how sensitive people are to a lot of the stuff that's going on. I love this quote. At the end of the day, people won't remember what you said or did. They will remember how you made them feel. So, you know, a few notes on kind of what's going on. Buyers want to believe in a bright future. So studies indicate that that there's a low, there we go. That there's a low percentage of pessimism right now, even in the face of everything that's going on. Best sales and marketing is about helping. So this goes back to what we were saying. You know, cut the fluff, show that you can deliver value. You know, focus on providing value for people. Use emotional intelligence. So anybody that's interested, you know, reply to the email that's following up. We did a fantastic webinar a few weeks back with one of the leading researchers in emotional intelligence in the workplace. It was a fantastic webinar. We'll also be doing some additional work with her going forward. But yeah, all of this is increasingly essential in paying attention to what you do. This is something that Jim and I talked about yesterday while we were prepping. When times are good, you know, everybody still has the best practices and things they should be doing. It just means that times are good, and so it's a little bit more forgiving if you don't do that stuff. You take the shortcuts, you take the easy route. When times get rough, it's not that things change so much, it's just that it gets that much more unforgiving if you're not doing the right things, the things that you know you should be doing. And so that's what a lot of this just boils down to is, you know, following the best practices and taking the time and the effort to do things the right way. A few quick notes on things not to do. Avoid emotional projections. You know, I understand your fear. You must be feeling like, we know how you feel. I've been feeling like. One thing that you can do, if this is something you're trying to do, is you can tell the story of what's going on with you. So, you know, oftentimes, you know, I've done several presentations on like the shifting landscape of lead gen right now. And instead of saying like, I know how people feel with, you know, events being canceled and stuff like that, I tell the story of like, hey, we had a half dozen events that were coming up and they all got canceled for us out of nowhere. And so we were left scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. And here's what we did. And so it's not just, you know, patronizing people saying like, I get it, I feel it. It's here's what happened to us, here's how we did it, type thing. And then another one, yeah, these are things that, you know, probably most of you have heard countless times and probably getting sick and tired of. You know, I've heard of people going so far as to just bucket stuff in a filter or a folder if it says coronavirus or COVID. You know, we're in this together, new normal, on whatever times, signing off with stay safe. These things are, are kind of platitudes. They're not really getting to the heart of it. You're not, I don't know you. I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're going through. For me to say like, stay safe, or we're in this together, like that's not really true. It's just me saying something for the sake of saying it. So be genuine. So yeah, sorry to rush through these last ones here a little bit. I don't have a hard stop. I don't think you do, Jim. So we can hang around and answer questions for anybody that has anything. But like I said, for anybody that needs to jump, we'll share the link to the recording as well as the deck after this. You can reply to those emails if you have any additional questions, want to do any additional follow-up, anything like that. So cool. If you've got any questions, drop it in the Q&A or the chat, and we can go over any of those.
Yeah,
go ahead.
There's one I saw earlier from Kevin when we were talking about Pi and personas that I could speak a little more on just real quick. Yeah. And he asked, how does Pi change for a marketing team shifting its focus from the traditional single persona focused demand waterfall to thinking about and acting based on buying groups? What's the implication for outreach tactics? So I think that's a really interesting question. And I think we've addressed this using our own technology. Gratefully, Leadspace has done some really great work on persona mapping. We have a full persona ontology is what we call it, that goes beyond just job title or function into skills and expertise, and combines it with technology data and other factors that map different personas. We have a library of personas, and then we can also combine those different signals in multiple ways to create custom personas for our customers. So a lot of times with customers, with ourselves, we create multiple personas that we're tracking and scoring against. And then we can look at, maybe at an account level, the presence or strength of those personas within the account. And then we can segment based on that. So we can do, a campaign with different persona messaging sort of angles, like we talked about, but targeted to those specific personas, and we can really identify them down to the person level, and target at that persona level, like we talked about. Activating it on a ad platform or in CRM or what have you, so we can track and monitor that. So that persona ontology, that persona definition or profile that our platform is able to provide really makes this pretty plug and play, pretty easy. And we've seen great results from getting to that level. Of course, I think it gets complex really quick. You usually, like I said, have one campaign and you cook one meal and you want to serve that to everybody. But definitely worth, putting in, like was commented, worth putting in the 10% effort extra to get smarter results.
Great. Kevin had another one here about mix of channels, phone, voicemail, email, content, other outreach channels. So how many touches over what time period, upon failure, what should you do? If they've basically gone through your sequence, gone through your touch program, what do you do with them after the fact? I've got some thoughts on that. Jim, do you want to jump in, or you want me to lead?
I think the volume that we're doing, I don't know that I have a ton of really like data proven results to share on this. We can look at individual campaigns and tell what worked for that particular one, but especially in B2B as a small to medium sized business, I think it does require a lot of volume. But I don't have any great learnings off the top of my head. Something I'd have to talk to some of our customers about and figure that out a little better.
Yeah, I mean, my reply to it is, and for anybody looking for a clear guidebook or something like that, I don't think that really exists. So, my answer is, make sure that you're recording this information in your CRM or wherever, so that you can look at what's working, what's not, and adjust accordingly. So, that's cadence, that's channels, that's, copy, what's going into the outreach, tone, things like that. And so, this is something I talk about all the time in sales, and especially in marketing outreach. No sooner do you find something that's breaking through or connecting, then everybody else starts discovering it and the ground shifts underneath you. So whatever is the guiding thing at this moment is only going to be there for this moment. And so, perfect examples like what's going on with text messages. You rewind, a year, 18 months ago, and, it was basically, you can maybe use text messages to confirm an appointment. And even then you're on sort of dicey ground. And, you go to today and, you have increasingly people that are interested in that being their primary channel. And I even have some of my sales team, one of the big things that we saw that shifted on us with everything that happened with COVID, is the fact that we have, such high coverage of work mobile numbers. That went from being kind of like that's kind of nice to have, to us closing deals on that because people are no longer in the office. So even if you have direct dial desk phones for individuals, if they're not in the office, it's not doing you a whole lot of good. And so our salespeople have had success even reaching out to people in cold outreach via text message. And whenever they get pushback, they're saying, well, wouldn't you like to know how I have your mobile work number? And that being an effective thing. And whereas, you even just a few months ago, prior to all this happening, I don't know that would have worked as well. And so, the short answer to it is constantly test, constantly evaluate, and reassess what's going on a regular basis. Even when you find something that seems to work, keep going back to it, making sure it's still working.
Yeah, I think there's a fine line between being effective at communicating, being effective at offering value and helping, like we talked about, and like bugging the hell out of somebody. So I like to err on less is more in my approach. But I think, like you said, measuring it, seeing what that threshold could be for your particular campaign, for your particular business. I think there's so many variables that it's hard, like you said, hard to have a playbook.
Yeah, it absolutely is a very difficult balancing act because, on one end, you don't want to piss people off. On the other end, like I tell my salespeople, if they don't occasionally hear somebody push back, then we're not doing enough.
Sure.
Because there's always somebody out there that's got really thin skin, and if we're not getting on, if we're not bothering them, then we're not getting through to most people. And so, you don't want a whole bunch of people pushing back, but you do want to occasionally see, your one or two people come through that, they're just going to get annoyed at anything.
Absolutely.
But cool. Let's see. We have one more for Kevin saying, if you've got a big enough operation, A/B testing pays dividends. Buyer preferences shift. And yep. So just reinforcing, constantly test, constantly measure, everything else. So we're about 10 minutes over. We'll give everybody one last second to drop anything in if they've got anything burning. Otherwise, we'll wrap this up for everybody. Like I said, we'll send out a link to the recording and the deck after we get that edited and up on the site. You can reply to those emails if you have any questions or want to do any additional follow-up with either one of us. And with that, I think we'll let everybody have the rest of their day. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. This was a great discussion. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.